All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our week 4 live classroom. Um, so a couple of things that I wanted to review with you guys from last week. Let me go ahead and make this nice and big for y'all. Okay, so first of all, I reviewed the peer review discussion boards, and you guys did a great job with your participation there. So nice work. As far as discussion boards go, don't miss out on any more extra credit. Welcome, whoever just joined. Christy, welcome. Yeah, don't miss out on any more extra credit. Okay, there is an extra credit discussion board every week for you guys, so don't miss out on that. Lena, good morning. Glad you could make it. Next thing, check my feedback on your peer review journals. So last week we had some issues being able to listen to my audio stuff. It was about 50-50. I got a lot of feedback that you guys could hear it, and then some feedback from several of you saying that you couldn't. So yeah. So hopefully this week you guys can hear it. I haven't gotten all the way through it. I'm a little bit behind this week just because of our move, but I will have those finished up in the next hour or two. So yeah, here's hoping that it works this week. I'm trying something different. So yeah, but any questions about last week, about anything that you guys saw or didn't see or wanted to see? Okay. I also got several emails about review questions last week. If you guys feel like, if you feel like that on your submission for your review questions, you should have gotten one of the questions right, but you didn't, shoot me an email, be like, hey, Brother Birch, this is what I put in. It said I was wrong. Either change my grade to make it right or explain to me why it's wrong, and I'll be happy to help you out with that. So yeah, but great job, you guys. Great job last week. All right, this week we are diving into JavaScript, which I'm really excited about. HTML is far behind us. Well, actually, I'm just kidding. We're going to use it all semester, but we're diving into JavaScript, and I'm excited about it. All right, so here is a very simple JavaScript program. Okay, this was written in Sublime, and I just took a screenshot of it. But as you can see, it's in an HTML document, and if I ran this program, it would look exactly. You know what? Let me see if I actually have it on here. Oh, good. I do have it on here. All right, let me open this up in our browser. Okay, so you can see the HTML. All we have here is a button that has message written on it. So if you look at this code, the only thing inside the body is this button. Is this big enough? Can you guys see this okay? Is that better? Okay. So all I have in the body right here is just a button. Okay. And so in the body of our HTML code is where we will see everything on the page. Okay. If I put a paragraph here, and saved it, you can see that this shows up also on the page, on the web page, and it's in the body. Okay, so all of our HTML we will have in the body of the HTML file, and then all of the JavaScript will be inside of a script tag in the head of the HTML document. Okay, so we have the head tag, which is kind of like a spot for all of the settings and stuff, or configurations, I guess I should say, for your HTML file. You know, saying what character set you're using, what the title will be that'll show up here in the tab, and you can also have a script tag where you can put JavaScript. Welcome to whoever just joined. Glad you could make it. So in here, I have just my defining table template right here, and then I have just a simple function that says alert, water is delicious. Okay, so if I run this and I click on this button right here, you can see it alerts water is delicious in this little light pop-up right here. Okay, so, and that's all in the JavaScript right here. And then we called that function show message with this on-click attribute on the button. So when you have an on-click attribute, it will look for this function inside of your script tag of your document. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. So the button is an HTML element. The on-click is an attribute of that element that will refer to whatever is inside of the script tag. So it will sift through everything in your script tag looking for whatever function you put in here. And then if it finds it, it'll run that function. And in this case, all it did was just pop up a little window that said water is delicious.
So Brother Birch, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Emily.
So the actual JavaScript command that opens the pop-up window, is that what's inside of the script then?
Yes. Yep. So the actual thing that opened up the window is this alert function.
Okay.
So you can see right here, I called a function called show message. Okay.
Mhm.
And I know that this is a function in JavaScript because it has the parentheses before and after, or just afterwards, it has these parentheses. So anytime you have a function in JavaScript, it's defined. So right here, we're defining a function. It's defined with parentheses. And then anytime you call a function, you also call it with the parentheses as well. So right here, this function is an alert function, which is built into JavaScript. Okay, and so if I saved it like this, and I refresh the page and I run it, it just says this page says nothing because I didn't put anything in the parentheses of that function. Okay, this function alert is waiting for a parameter with some type of text or something to actually like display to the user. If I don't put any text in there, then it won't show anything. It'll just be an empty pop-up. Okay, but yeah, so these are both functions. The show message one that we wrote right here, and this alert function, which is built into JavaScript.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you put more than one, like, can it do more than one thing? So it could say water is delicious and then, I don't know, do something else in the same little function box? Yeah, like
Yes,
that.
it could. Let's try it real quick. All right, so I have 3 alert functions. Let's see how this works. So I just refresh the page. Okay, water is delicious. It'll close. Oh, water is delicious 2 just popped up. And water is delicious 3 just popped up. Okay, so in this case, I mean, I could put anything I want into my function. I could put math in here. I could put 50 alerts in here. You know, I could call other functions that I wrote and have them do something. In this case, I just called the alert function 3 times with different messages on each. So yeah, I mean, in your functions, you can, they can, some are really short and some are really long potentially. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. All right, good questions, you guys. So let's head back over here. All right. So running a program. JavaScript code can be executed from a number of different events. Okay, so when the page loads, I could have JavaScript, you know, to run immediately when the page loads. I can have it run when the user clicks on something like a button to tell you that water is delicious. You can actually run JavaScript code when you move the mouse. So let's say I have a game, I could have a function that's waiting to see the mouse move. And if it moves in a certain way or to a certain place on the page, or just moves period, I could trigger a JavaScript event. I could call a function when that event happens. Or even when a certain time requirement is met. So let's say I load the page, and when I load the page, I call a function that says, you know, wait 5 seconds to do something. And then after that 5 seconds, it might call another function. So all of these are different ways that JavaScript can be executed. Okay, in this class, I don't think we'll worry about doing it when the mouse moves or with time requirements, but we'll definitely be calling lots of functions when the user clicks on something. So any questions about this? Okay. All right, so comments. So last week, let me go back to this program right here. Last week, I showed you guys how to do a comment like this, and you might have seen something like this on your quiz. So this is how you do a comment in HTML. It's kind of funny. You have an opening bracket or an opening or a lesser than sign and a greater than sign to close this tag, if you will. You know, similar to how these look, but then inside of it, you start it off with an exclamation mark and 2 hyphens, and then you end it with 2 hyphens, and then whatever I put in the middle is just my comment. And I could like put this on separate lines, do whatever I want, and it's still a comment. Okay, so that's how you do a comment in HTML. In JavaScript, there's 2 ways to do comments, and I have both in here. These are single line comments. So if I took these 2 forward slashes off of here, You can see it changed the colors here. It's not a comment anymore. It's trying to find, these different variable names. And if I ran it right now, it wouldn't work. We'd see a bunch of errors. Okay. So this is a single line comment, each one of these three. This right here is a multi-line comment. Okay. All these little asterisks are just there for show. What really defines the comment in JavaScript, a multi-line comment, is having this / asterisk and this asterisk /. So one to kind of open up the comment and one to end it. If I wanted, I could have it all be on the same line. Whoops, I deleted the asterisk. Okay, so when your computer runs it and it sees this right here, to start off the comment, it will leave everything as a comment until it sees this thing end. Okay, so now I put it down here, and this entire function is now in a comment as well, because I put this down here. Okay, so those are two examples of comments. As far as the difference between them, it's just both do the same thing. If I know I'm going to have a long comment, like a defining table, and I'd have like an input and processing and output, for me, I use this multi-line comment. For this one, I could use multi-line comment, or, I wanted to show you guys how to do a single line comment as well. So yeah, any questions about comments? Okay. All right. So a couple of other things. Statements, I had some questions last week about the importance of semicolons. It is important to put semicolons at the end of your statement. So if I look at this right here, you can see I have this statement right here that ends with a semicolon. Okay. And then I have these curly braces, which denote the beginning and ending of a function in JavaScript. And a function is technically a very large statement with a bunch of other statements inside of it. And so all of your statements should be concluded properly, either with a semicolon or if it's a function ending with a closing brace. As we mentioned last week, JavaScript is case sensitive. So let's play with this a little bit. Let's say I put a capital S right here. So I have a function called show message, and I'm going to call a lowercase show message right here. Okay. I'm going to refresh the page and I click on it. Nothing happens. Okay. If I hit F12, or if I right click and hit inspect, you can see I have this little red X right here with the number 1, and that means there's one error. So when I said that a bunch of errors would be showing up on here, they actually don't show up on the page, but they will show up in the developer tools of Google Chrome. Okay, so for this one, I have a nice little red X right here showing this error. It says show message is not defined. Okay, so anytime I have this error, I know that I tried to call a function called show message and it didn't find it. Okay, so we know that all of our functions are going to be searched for inside the script tag of our HTML document. Okay, and so it just said show message isn't defined, and that's because this is a capital S. Okay, and if I go back, if I save this now and refresh it and click on it, you can see the pop-up came up and there's no error in our console. Okay. I always tell my students this. I would highly encourage you to leave these tools open when you're developing code. Okay, they're extremely helpful. If errors are showing up, because otherwise I would have just pushed this button and nothing happened. I would be like, hey, is like Google Chrome like frozen? Is there something wrong with my computer? Did I click it? But with this open, you'll be like, oh, it did get clicked and it threw an error because the function didn't exist. Okay. So I would encourage you to leave those tools open while you're writing your code.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, go, Christina.
But it's case sensitive, but then the middle of it doesn't matter. It's just the beginning letters, because like in the middle of that, there's a capital M. That's okay.
So it is all case sensitive. The reason why it didn't matter was because this one has a capital M, and so does this one. But if I like changed all of this to uppercase like this, like show message, it still wouldn't work, because when I call this function show message, it will look for this exact text. Every single character has to match. Lowercase, uppercase, they all have to match.
But moving forward, we should just have it all lowercase, or should we have the second part of that command be a capital, or as long as they match, it's okay? Or what's the standard?
Yeah, so the JavaScript standard is to have camel case. So you always start off with a lowercase name for the function, and then if you have any like words in there,
Mhm.
you know, you technically could use like underlines to like separate them, but the JavaScript standard is to use camel case like this.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yep, great question. All right, let's see here. Okay, declare variables. Okay, so we have var name. That's how we declare a variable in JavaScript. So here's an example of string concatenation with declaring a variable. Okay, so I declared a variable right here called var message. So a variable named message, and I'm assigning a value to it that says hello, and then it uses a variable name, and then it says how are you today. Okay, so if I'm pretty sure I have this saved somewhere. Oh, good. Okay, so I have a var name. Okay, and I'm calling another function called prompt, which is a built-in JavaScript function, and I'll show you guys what that does here in a sec. It basically pops up a window similar to the alert, but with an input that you can type stuff into. Okay, and then once they finish that input and they hit OK, it'll save that value into the variable name. And then in here, I made a new variable called greeting, and I said hello plus name, whatever the user put in. And I said, I hope you're well today. And then I will alert that greeting. Okay, so you can see this function, greet user, again with the camel case, does several things. Okay, it gets the name from the user, it creates a greeting, and then it alerts that greeting. It displays that greeting to the user. So if I copy this file path and run it, you can see in the page again, all I have is this button, because all I have in the body is just a simple button that says hello. And then this button will call greet user, which is right here. And notice in Sublime, when I selected this, it automatically kind of like put a little box around this greet user to say, hey, I found this function, you should be good to go. Whereas, you know, if I had this right here, you know, it didn't find that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So I hit hello. We have a pop-up very similar to the alert, but it has an input in here. So it says, please enter your name. So I'll just say Nathan. Okay. And then immediately it says, hello, Nathan, I hope you're well today. All right. So this is an example of declaring some variables using string concatenation to make more personalized variables, if you will, and then calling another function to display that to the user. Any questions about any piece of this function?
I have a question about spacing with like quotation marks, because sometimes you have spacing, sometimes you don't, and it's like all confusing.
Yeah, it is spacing. I mean, it is confusing. Okay, so first of all, this space right here, with string concatenation, it will take everything exactly the way they put it in and just throw it together. Okay, so if I took this space out and I ran it again, it says hello, I'll type my name. You can see it doesn't have a space here after hello. It just threw my variable name of Nathan just right up against hello. So this space right here was just to make it so that I had a nice pretty string, you know, so that I had a space between my variables. And you can see I have a period after name, and so it shows up nicely when I had that space there. Okay, now all these other spaces, like around the equal signs and around the plus signs, you actually don't have to have those. So if I took these out, and if I took these out as well, okay, it's a little bit scrunched up, but nothing wrong with that. If I ran this again, type in my name, you can see it did the exact same thing. Okay, the computer didn't find any difference in what I did. The only difference is in your preference. Okay, my preference generally is to have a space between them. I like having it just a little bit spaced out. I think it's a little bit easier for me to read. But sometimes if I have a lot of stuff or something, I won't use spaces. But that's more of a personal call.
So what if you put space on one side and forget to put space on the other side? Is it going to mess up your program?
No, I could leave that like that, and the computer will still read it the exact same way.
That's good.
And if you're really curious, when the computer runs this code, it doesn't really see it line by line like we do. It will actually be what's called a minified version, and so all of this will be like in a single line of code. Like when the computer runs it, it'll just like throw it all together. It'll take these spaces out when it renders it anyways, and it'll just kind of sift through it. So it's a good question. And any other questions about this? Okay. Let's keep going. All right, okay, so we just went through all that. All right, next example, text fields instead of alerts. All right, so with this example, pop-ups to me feel very like 90s-ish. I feel like lots of websites that used to exist like in the 90s and early 2000 years had lots of pop-ups. And today, pop-ups still have their place, but they're not nearly as common. What people are more used to seeing is seeing data actually display on the page. And so this example, I have a function called apply scripture, and it assigns a variable to name, assigns a variable to scripture using name with a bunch of string concatenation. These pluses right here are only there because I wanted to put things on a different line. Okay, we'll go through this in a second, and you don't have to have those pluses there. But then it will put that value onto the page. All right, so let's check this out real quick. So I have the same program. Now, document is part of your HTML page. Okay, it's something built in. It's part of the DOM, what's called the DOM, and it's what your computer uses to get everything to display on the page properly. But the document object in JavaScript has a lot of different stuff in it. Okay, and one of the functions that it has is called getElementById. Okay, in your review questions last week, there was a question: how do you uniquely identify an HTML element? The answer was ID. Okay, as simple as that. That's the attribute that uniquely identifies an HTML element. So if you look at this, I have an ID attribute and another ID attribute. And then up in here, I'm like, okay, document.getElementById, name input box. Okay, so whatever the user puts into this input, I want to put that into this variable. Okay, and then I'll make a new variable with it. And then I'm going to find my output div ID and display that variable that I made in that output div ID. Okay, so there's a lot to take in, and kind of a lot of different parts working together, but let's go ahead and run this. And let's see how it works. So you can see I have an input right here, and I can right click on this and hit inspect, and it will show me my HTML code right here. This is everything in my HTML code. You can see my script right here, you know, the whole shebang. And I can see that it has a unique ID of name input box. You can see that this button calls apply scripture. All right. And so if I type in my name, Nathan, and hit this button, it will call apply scripture. And then it puts my name into this little string, and then it displayed it in my output div. Okay. So this div beforehand, if I look at it, it doesn't have anything in it. Okay. But as soon as I type this in, now I can open this up and it shows that, hey, there's some text that was thrown in here. And that's because of the JavaScript function apply scripture. Okay. Any questions about this?
It might be a silly question, but how do we know when we use like input, when we use div? Because right now it's all in one big mush in my head.
So that's a good question. So let's think of it this way. A div is anytime you want to like put something onto the page. Okay. An input is anytime you want to get something from the user. So let's say you want the user to be able to, you know, like do a math problem. Okay. Let's say I have like 2 inputs for like math. Okay. And I'll say this plus this, and then I'll output like the sum of those values. Okay. So I would have an input for each one of those, because that's when the user will actually be typing something in, and something that I need to use in my program. And then I could use a div to output whatever I wanted to them. Now here's the interesting thing about a div. Okay, div is short for divisor or divider, and it basically just makes like a separate space on your page to put something. But I could have a paragraph. Whoops, I could have a paragraph here. Okay, and still have it be called I guess output div doesn't really make much sense, but I could call it output, okay? And then if I run this, it will look very similar, okay? See that? The only thing that it did, I guess, was it just added a little space right here. That's because the HTML paragraph has a little space around it for a paragraph, okay? But most of your assignments will ask you to output to a div. But yeah, so we use divs for outputting stuff, and then inputs for anytime the user has to put something into your program. Any other questions? Okay, cool little side note, something that I just did. In Sublime, if you select a text, you can see that it shows the other points in my program where it shows this particular string. Once I have one selected, if I hit Control D, it will automatically select the next instance of that. Okay, so if I double click right here and hit Control D twice, then I could change the name of this in all the places that it's at. So I could put it back to output div, and it'll change all three of them. Okay, that was with Control D. Sublime has a bunch of cool stuff. You can see expand selection to Word. Control D is right there, and it has a bunch of really cool stuff that you can do. But side note. Anyways, all right. So let's come back into here. Your assignment this week will look very similar to the last two programs that we've just ran. Using string concatenation, getting input from a user, whether it's in the body of a page or like in an alert box, and then displaying something else to the user. Okay, reserved words in JavaScript. If you're using a text editor and you're using it correctly, you don't really have to worry too much, because the second I type in one of these words, it'll show up in this like nice pink color or a blue color or something like that. Okay, but these are the reserved JavaScript words, which means you cannot use them as variable names or anything like that. I could put them into a string, you know, as long as it's in the quotation marks. I could put these words into a string and it doesn't matter. But I cannot name variables these things or name functions these things. So you see document right here. It says this is a reserved JavaScript object. We just used document. And in our code, you can see that it shows up in this nice blue color. If I type in instance of, well, I guess that one didn't change color. Let's see here. Nulls, like if I typed in like null right here, it'll show up as like this purple color. And most of these, you know, if I type in if or else, you know, most of them will show up in a different color. And that's because they're used for specific things. You can see var shows up as a specific color. But again, like I said, if I put something into a string, I could type in var null instance of document, and it won't matter because they're all inside of a string. So the compiler doesn't really care about it. It's just like, oh, that's a string. You know, they can do whatever they want with that. But outside of that, I couldn't like name a function, you know, like var or null or document, because there's already a function, like there's already a document object in JavaScript. So so these are just for your reference. You don't have to memorize these. I'm never going to test you on them, but they're important. It's important to know that they exist. And usually, if something's not working, you'll be like, oh, you know, maybe that's because that's not supposed to be like that, or it's a reserved word or something. But you shouldn't have too many problems. So
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I'm sorry.
No,
I just was looking at the function for the applying scripture one that we just looked at, and do you have to have var with the name? I understand you need a var with the name because the computer is knowing that that's saving space for them to put their name in there, right? But why do you need var for scripture? Because you're typing in that.
Great question. Yeah, it does. So let's go back to this. So scripture is going to be used down here, right? And so if I don't save scripture right here, then I wouldn't really be able to put this, you know, display it to the output div. Okay. Now here's something interesting. This I feel like is the most logical way to have this function work. With that said, I don't have to have it like this. If I wanted to, I could put this whole thing right here. Okay. And JavaScript wouldn't care. I don't technically have to use like the function or the variable name right here to save that. Instead, I could just get this value and then automatically save it to scripture. Now, the reason why I didn't do that is because I feel like that kind of like mixes some of my logic together. In my mind, I'm like thinking input, processing, output. Okay, what am I getting from the user? What do I need to do with it? And what am I displaying to the user? And that's how this was organized, like this. We have our input right here, our processing, if you will, and then our output. Okay, but on the other hand, I could also take this whole thing and put it right here. Okay, and that would do the exact same thing as well. All right, I didn't have to save it in a variable named scripture if I just want to throw it directly into the HTML. Okay, and that would do the exact same thing as well.
Okay.
Okay, but anytime you're going to use a variable along the line or anything, you should save it first.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. And then I just realized I forgot to tell you guys. So these pluses, like I said, you don't need them. Again, if I hit Control D, I can select both of them, and I can just throw these all into one single string. Okay, and this right here, I have word wrap on. So if I go into Edit, oh, where is word wrap? View, word wrap. There it is, big blue check. If I turn word wrap off, you can see this is all line 19, and then I have to like scroll over to see it all. Okay, and so I put the pluses in there just to kind of show you guys how you can do string concatenation a little bit more. But regularly, I don't use the pluses just because I'm like, all right, it's easier for me to see it and read it without them. It's easier to get less bugs and less errors without them. And if I want to have word wrap on, I can turn it on. And then like this, you know, I can change this to any size and it'll keep on wrapping it, you know, or I can just leave it off and see them all line by line and scroll if I want to. Okay, so, but that's what those pluses are for. You don't need them. You can leave it all in one line like this. Okay. All right. Any questions about the keywords or what I just covered here? Okay. You guys, I'm excited. We're like getting into the good stuff of this class. Like, I love JavaScript. Okay, debugging is what I like to call fixing a dysfunctional program. Okay, or finding something that you need. So here's I'm going to kind of go through an example of how you debug. If real quick before I go into this, in our video spreadsheet, I do have a video. Whoops, where'd we go? Oh man, sorry guys. Okay, I do have a video on debugging. Okay, and it's this one right here with the sources, the Chrome Developer Tools 3, just so you know. But we are going to go through it real quick right now as well. So first of all, debugging steps. So make sure it's saved as an HTML file. Okay, in one of the peer review journals that I read this morning, one of the students said that they weren't, you know, their code looked perfect and everything, and it took them forever to figure out why it wasn't working, and then they realized it wasn't saved as an HTML file. Validate your code. So make sure it's saved as an HTML file. Validate it. So go over to the validator.w3.org or just go to Google and type in HTML validator and then paste your code in and make sure that it's not getting any errors. And then check the JavaScript console. Okay, that's where we saw like our little red errors thrown up with the show message function that didn't exist, or that wasn't defined, I should say. So check your JavaScript console and the developer tools, and then use the JavaScript debugger. Now, let's dive into that. So I have this program right here with the scripture, right? It's currently on the Elements tab. These are our developer tools, currently in the Elements tab. And here I can see the HTML attributes and my exact HTML code. You know, if I wanted to, I could even go in here and, you know, like edit this. I could like right click on this, edit it, say, this is some new text that I'm testing. Okay, and I can actually like change what's showing here with this Elements tab. Okay, we're going to skip over the network one. We don't really care about that for this class. The console, that's exactly where we saw these errors. Okay, so if I go back in here and change that to a lowercase s or something, that threw an error for us earlier, and you can see that error showed up beautifully right here. People don't like to see errors, but it's better to see an error and to have something not work than to have something not work and not see an error. Okay, it's a lot easier to debug if you have something red showing you, like glaring at you in the face. So that's what the console tab's for. And then these little things right here are these like awesome hyperlinks. And if I click on one, it'll go over to the sources tab. Okay, the sources tab is an incredible thing where you can actually like interact with your code and see how it's working. Here it shows that this where the error came up. It said apply scripture is not defined, and I can look at that and see that this is where my error was, and then I could like look in my JavaScript and see that it wasn't defined. Okay, now let's go over debugging a little bit as far as using these tools right here. Okay, I can put a breakpoint by selecting a line inside of a function. Okay, if I click on the function, okay, this will get rendered as soon as the page loads. So if I hit refresh, you can see my code stopped right here because it just like went over all the JavaScript code. But if I want to see what happens when I actually click on the button and it calls this function, I'll put a breakpoint inside of this function. Okay, and so now as soon as I click on this button, this breakpoint should stop right here. So I'm going to click on it, and nothing happened. Okay, I see this error pop up, this red line shows up, and it's because it's not defined. Okay, so let's fix that real quick. And now let's do the exact same thing. So I have a breakpoint inside of my correctly named function. And I'm gonna hit the button, and you can see my code stopped. It's all frozen over here, kind of darkened out, and it says it's paused in debugger. And over here, I can hover over document and see everything that's in this JavaScript object, this document object. Okay, there's a lot of stuff, everything from like URL to where stuff is, like a billion things that we're not going to look at. Last modified, what the different colors of things are, if things are visible or not. And then inside this, we have a function called, let's see if I can find it, get element by ID. Okay, and we don't have to find it, it's right here. And it shows that it's a function. That's what this little like blue F is for right here. All right, and the cool thing is I can highlight this section right here and see what it will render, okay? And it says document is not defined. I guess I didn't select the D. But if I select this whole thing like with value and all the way to document, you can see it has an empty string right here. That's because I didn't type anything in, okay? And if I F10, I'll go to the next step and I can see name is just an empty string because I didn't type anything in, okay? And then if I F10 again, it's still concatenated that, everything that I wanted to for scripture, and I can see what's coming up. And then I can highlight over this thing to make sure that, this element actually exists, and then it'll assign scripture to it, okay? And so using the debugger, you can step through your code. And so right here, I could see each piece of my code. And so if something wasn't working, like let's say it wasn't like displaying on the page at the end, I could walk through it and be like, okay, name got the right variable, scripture got the right variable. So it must be this line of code, something's wrong with it, okay? And so you can step through your code just by clicking over here, putting a breakpoint in, running the function, and then hitting F10 to kind of step through it. And you can like hover over things as you go, okay? You'll get more practice with this in the weeks to come. And with this, similar to all of JavaScript, the more you do it, the better you'll get. So don't be too overwhelmed by this, but just be aware that it's here and it's extremely helpful. So any questions about this? Okay, well, this was just recorded and there's a video in here for you to review what each one of these tabs in the developer tools are for. All right. Okay. I think that was all I had for you guys today. Are there any other questions? But anything in the chapter 4 content or anything in the class in general?
I had a question about last week.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Spencer.
I was looking at my code, and the problem with the code they said was I didn't close a p tag, but it didn't come up in an error when I did the checker. I was wondering why.
So if I remember correctly, I think I did grade yours this morning and I gave you full credit on it. But it does happen sometimes. It can happen if you're missing a closing p tag, or if in here, let's say I had a paragraph like this and I had some text in here. I saw several submissions that were submitted like this, okay? where the opening tag was exactly the same as the closing tag. So technically, this is another opening tag. And to finish this off, I would need 2 closing p tags to have this validate correctly. All right. But Spencer, I'm pretty sure in your case, I did review it and I didn't see any issues with it. But I did see several students who had a closing tag like this that didn't have the slash, and that would dock them points. But yeah, but any questions like that, anytime you see something like that, or you get something back from the auto grader, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not right, just shoot me an email. I always grade. I know the auto grader isn't perfect, and so I always urge my students not to stress too much about it. But like if it says it doesn't validate, yeah, go figure out why it's not validating. But if your code's working perfectly and it just like didn't give you points or something, you know, just shoot me an email and be like, hey, Brother Birch, this should have worked and it's not giving me full points, and I'll explain why it didn't, or just give you full points. So does that help, Spencer?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions?
I have a couple. Well, first you just said that autograder is not the autograder, but that was my question about W3 schools. Now, do they always see the same mistakes as like debugger and console, whatever, or not?
They should. They're picky in different ways. So the autograder will also check you on the content of the assignment. You know, so W3 schools won't care if you had 1 paragraph or 2. The autograder for last week's assignment did. So that's one difference. As far as the validation of the HTML itself, though, they will be very similar. Okay, so if you're missing a closing tag and it shows up in the validator, it'll most likely show up with the autograder as well. You know, if the HTML itself didn't validate. So, but the validator won't check for any like assignment specific things. It'll just check to make sure that it's valid code.
And another question, I think I'm running ahead, but the exam next week, because it's coming up, but the next week has a lot. So what to expect with the exam?
Okay, so next week's live classroom will be a fun one. It'll be a little bit longer. We're going to go over the exam. In my announcement next week, I'm also going to post a practice exam that you can go through, and I also post a practice key. Okay, so what I always recommend to students, I'm like, okay, I just gave you the practice exam and all the answers to it. Don't just check out the answers, like take the practice exam. You know, I know everyone's lives are busy, but take time, take the exam. It'll give you a really good feel for how you're going to do on the actual exam. The exam is closed internet. You can't just Google stuff, but you will be able to use W3 schools, use programs that you've written, use the book. You know, so it's not like closed book, but you can't just like Google stuff. So I always encourage students, I'm like, okay, take the practice exam, you know, using the resources that are allowed on the exam itself, and then compare it with the answers that I gave for the practice exam, and see how you did, and then just keep practicing until you got it. It is comprehensive, so it will cover the first 5 weeks of the course. So we have to go back to week 1 and jog your memory on what the motherboard does and different things like that. So yeah, but I'll give you everything that you need to be successful. So, and as a side note, I will go through the practice exam in next week's live classroom. So if you guys want to try to take that on Monday, that'd be awesome, because come Tuesday at this time next week, I'll basically do it with you guys and explain why things are the way they are. So, good question, and no worries looking ahead. I would do the same thing. Any other questions?
I had a quick question. When we are starting our assignments for this week, are we supposed to type everything from scratch, or do we copy and paste and then just change the elements that make it unique to us, or what's the expectation?
That is your call. If there's nothing in the assignment that says you have to type out every word, then I don't expect you to type out every word. I know for me, like, I'm pretty sure at the end of chapter 4, I wonder if I have a window open here. There we go. I'm pretty sure at the end of chapter 4, there is a programming exercise that encourages you to write a template file that you can use for all of your assignments. And I would highly encourage you to do that. I also put in our video spreadsheet, I made a video on how I would make a template. But yeah, number 3 on here, create and validate a well-formed HTML document that you can use as a template for future assignments. Okay, and if I look at my template right here, I just have it down here outside of each chapter, and I can just take this template and I just copy and paste it anytime I'm making a new assignment. And so obviously, I mean, apparently I did something at some point to mess with my template, but I would make a template assignment and then just not edit it anymore, and then copy and paste it over and over again. Okay, I don't expect you to like type out this meta char set word for word every week, or even any of this stuff. I mean, you can for sure, but I would encourage you to just save it in a template file and kind of go off that anytime you make a new assignment. Good question, Christina. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, I just want to apologize on taking a little bit longer than usual to grade your stuff. I'll have all that finished up a little bit today. But I wish you all the best on week 4, and please feel free to reach out if I can help with anything. So thank you all for coming. It's great to have you guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great week.